we really want to start with word of prayer. Do we have a volunteer here for prayer? Thank you, sister. Could you please?
Let us pray. Father God in heaven, we thank you so much, Father, for the time that you've given us together in your holy Sabbath day. Father, we ask now that you would just continue to just dwell here with us, Father, allow your spirit to touch our hearts, Father, to transform us. As we hear this message from you, we ask these things in Christ Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. All right, so it's a PowerPoint presentation, but I hope it's going to be interactive. In other words, please do feel free to chip in at any time and contribute your insights, your experiences, question what is being said, and we'll try to bring our cumulative wisdom to bear on the topic so that we can be better informed and also better prepared. And also perhaps educated in a way that we can be of help to others who may be facing some tough times in their lives. Okay, are we okay with that? Yeah? All right, so this topic here is about divorce. It's not about marriage. It's not about remarriage. So I make that clear, because these are two separate, very big topics as well. And even the topic of divorce, we only have limited time to be able to more or less skim the surface. That's what we are going to do. But by the same token, it's good for us to be able to do that. It may be quite helpful, I would hope. Now, okay, all right. A few facts about divorce. 42% of marriages in the UK end up in divorce. As a matter of fact, since the 1970s, fewer people have chosen to marry. They prefer cohabitation, partnerships, whatever you want to call those arrangements. And 45% of children born today in the UK will not live with both parents by age 15. Yeah. 8 out of 10 children whose parents have split think it's the right decision. That's an interesting statement, isn't it? Why is that? Is it because they feel happier that their parents have split? Or perhaps because they've been, I was going to use the word program, but let's say educated to think that it is okay, and that the culture approves of it, and that they will, in a way, not have to have the, people laughing at them or not understanding them or anything of that nature. Yes?
So you're saying that 8 out of 10 children whose parents have split think it's the right decision. So the children are the ones who think it's the right decision? Is that what you're saying?
Precisely, yes.
I'm only speaking of what I've witnessed because I work in a youth center.
Yes.
And I've seen in our environment, I've seen where both parents are there, and I've seen where both parents are deployed or they are separated, and the children think that it's the right decision because their families, their parents are no longer arguing, feuding back and forth. And so even the children are sick of it. Either like, just, you know what, mom, dad, y'all, this is not going to work. And I've seen it where a child saw their parents, in the same household arguing back and forth, and then I'll say 2 weeks later they decided to separate. That child was a totally different child.
Yes, okay.
A totally different child.
All right.
And she was more happier, more interactive, and
yes.
she was more delightful.
All right.
Period.
Okay. Okay. All right, thanks for that insight. 76% of divorces try to fix their relationships before they split. So in other words, when people marry, they don't marry, well, till divorce do us part. That's not what they have in mind. They marry till death do us part. That's what the pledge is, isn't it? They don't marry with the intention of divorcing, so to speak, yeah? So the pain of divorce can be as intense, if not more, than that of the death. Yeah? All right, and now look at that. Family breakdown costs the taxpayer £47 billion a year. In strict economics terms, it's not a good thing, is it? It's very draining on the economy, let alone the emotional side of things and so forth. So these, I got all this through, I was watching Victoria Derbyshire, her program in the morning, and that was just recently, on the 8th of, actually I said January, in fact it's February. It's February. January. No, actually it was 8th of February. It was just recently, I was watching it. No, actually it should be February, it should be 8-2. Should be 8-2, BBC One. You can go back, it's still there on iPlayer. You can watch it. And there was a section there on that particular topic. And that's where I got all this information from. Plus they were quoting different sources such as Understanding Society, UK Household Study, and lawyers, and the Office of National Statistics, and so forth. Okay, moving on. There are all sorts of reasons why people divorce. Yeah. Apparently, these are the top 6 reasons for divorce. You might agree or disagree. You might think of something else. But this is what this particular article, which I will just develop it a bit further here, says. The number one thing is control. That is, attempt to control spouses' behavior, their friends, finances, activities, by using threats, anger, excessive criticism, emotional abuse. You could add other things such as manipulation and mind games and so on and so forth. And then there's addiction, persistent history of gambling, drug, alcohol use, or other behavior that harms the spouse and the children and family relationships. And of course, there's a whole range of addictions as well, as we know. Then the third one is repeated cheating and infidelities that, one affair after the next very often, and with no intention or willingness to change. Yes, that's another one.
Sorry,
yes.
Just to add something, in addictions,
yes.
I read a study about how many divorces are caused by, because one of them is addicted on social media. Yes. Like Facebook or things like this. One of them, and this problem is so hard that sometimes they split because they can't cope with that.
That's right, yes.
So addiction. So it's a behavioral addiction.
Yeah, okay. That's right. And then you have workaholism as well, which is another addiction. Yes. Where relationships break down after a while because people are not available for each other. They get so caught up with their careers and what have you. And sometimes sports, and so on and so forth. Yes, so that's, yes, you want to say something?
No, I was saying the first one is actually a criminal offense, by the way.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a criminal offense to control your partner's behavior. It was made a criminal offense in January.
Oh, right, yes.
Yes, this year. So it's actually a criminal offense for you to do that, for you to control their money or for you to control them.
Yeah.
It's a criminal offense. So it's not normally, before it wasn't, but now it's a criminal offense for you to do that. And you will get between 6 to 8 months in prison. Yes. So
if you're convicted.
Offense. Yeah.
So there we are, you see, we are learning new things all the time. Things are changing and we have to keep up to date with the latest. Thank you for that. And then number 4, mistreatment of children. And so there's violence, inappropriate sexual behavior towards children, and whether these children are biological or not. So among reasons for divorce, this situation calls for the most immediate action. Remove yourself and the children from contact with this person right away and seek professional help. That's the advice that is given there.
Jacob, he was so accident prone. He broke his arm.
Yes.
Or your leg.
Leg and arm.
Leg and arm. But at different times. But because Jacob actually climbed up on one of Richard's trolleys that was like 6 foot tall and pretended to be a cat, the dog was barking at him. And Richard had packaging on top, but what Jacob didn't realise, he was only about 6 or 7, the packaging was so near the edge that he actually hit the ground and ruptured his spleen. And the head teacher actually got social services to come and see us because
Yes.
The lady said, I know you're not mistreating your son, but she actually, I said, look, he's just accident prone, it's not us, I mean, you know, but all the way to hospital because he was so great. Don't go to sleep, Jacob, keep awake, keep awake. And Richard was driving like, I think God must have known he'd get to hospital because there were no cars on the road. It was 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening and Richard did 100 miles per hour. Yeah. And no police cars.
Don't say that too loud.
No police cars, which was a blessing. But yes, you know, and Jacob was such a good boy. He was only little, but the doctor said, Jacob, where's your pain? And he pinpointed and he said, you know, you've got a very clever son. He said, most adults don't even know where there's pain on. Jacob just, but yes, but he said he might never, but Jacob fully recovered. It's totally. But yes, we had social services, and I said I felt really bad, but it wasn't our fault. We didn't.
Yes.
You know, Jacob's just accident prone.
Right. Yes. Well, yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? As responsible people who was looking after kids, like teachers and so forth, they have to be on the lookout for anything that is unusual, so that find out a little bit more about it to see if the child is really safe where they are. Then there is unchecked mental disorder. Mental illness can challenge relationships, but with proper treatment can be managed with some happy results. So at the same time, spouses' uncontrolled mental health or personal disorder can be also unsafe and unhealthy for the spouse or the rest of the family. So that's one of the reasons which people give. And then there's physical violence. This calls for immediate action, obviously. If you are in an unsafe situation, it is critical that you remove yourself immediately, because physical violence toward anyone, especially you or your children, without commitment to get help is a deal breaker. Right. So this is the reference that you can see at the bottom. Then the top 5 common fixable marriage complaints. We just don't communicate very well. We can't seem to be able to resolve our conflicts. So conflict and communication difficulties are the most common complaints of divorcing couples. You can fix these problems, however, with marriage counseling, learn collaborative communication, conflict resolution skills before you marry. And otherwise, you risk losing what could have been a great marriage and are likely to find yourself in the same situation with a different person. So then the other one is, I just don't love him anymore or love her anymore. The nature of passion changes over time, with the initial heady infatuation taking on a different quality later on. Simple changes, though, can reignite the spark. Sex and intimacy can be improved. Then the third is because it'll be better for the kids. Yeah? So yes, having fighting parents is really tough on those kids. And at the same time, divorce is also really hard on them. even a divorce through mediation, attorneys or lawyers or whatever, which is typically viewed as the best way to ease through the transition, is very difficult for the kids to deal with. And if you keep fighting while you divorce, it's still bad. So one great solution is learn how to stop fighting. Replace your arguments with respectful dialogue and gratifying shared problem solving. And number 4 is he or she is just not the same person I married.
You can't control
Now, the fact of the matter is that we all change, don't we not? You know. It's been said that, you know, when a woman walks down the aisle, she says, "I'll change him."
It's true. They all change.
I was also a Christian.
Yes.
By a Catholic priest, because my husband and I were going to marry.
Yeah.
And he says, "Would you like to change him?" I said, "Yes." He said, "What you want to change?" I said, "From a single man to a married man."
That's a good one.
So he says, "No, baby, I think you want to change me more than that." I said, "Yes, I want you to be a
Yeah.
Catholic."
Now, what is important in the marriage is to be each other's cheerleader, isn't it, on your journeys. It's okay to have different interests and beliefs. Power of 2 skills teach you how to reconcile your differences, yes, instead of having them lead to separation or divorce. You know about these divorces that are based on irreconcilable differences. And and then we say, well, how come I don't see any of that? Yeah, the very fact that you said that proves the point. Yeah, I don't trust him or her anymore. So he lied and made a stupid deal. She's gambled or cheated. Sometimes people do make mistakes, and at the same time, most mistakes are repairable. So you have to get the skills to analyze your errors, prevent future repeats. Sometimes the sourer the lemon, the sweeter the lemonade. So it is said.
You put kisses in it, Pastor.
Huh?
You put kisses in it.
Yeah, that's right. So when your marriage throws lemon at you, make lemonade out of it. Right, you know, just that reminds me of a sermon which a pastor preached once, and I've got it here. I'm not going to preach the sermon, but I just want to give you the gist of it. It appeared in the Adventist Review, actually. It was last year. It was by Pastor Martin King of the South Center Seventh-day Adventist Church Washington Conference. And then the title is "When Divorce is the Solution to Marital Problems." And then he has a commentary there. It says, "What is marriage?" And this is his definition of marriage. Are you ready for it? It is a refining process, a furnace.
A what?
A furnace meant to consume the dross. That's his definition of marriage. Yeah, that's right. So he said, so Sabbath morning he stands in front of his congregation and he says, "I highly recommend divorce." Yes, that's what he says. And so he said, now I had the attention of my members. Nobody's sleeping anymore. You know, on their iPhones, twittering and texting, conference president, the whole world. Adventist pastor is saying that he highly recommends divorce. But then you have to listen to the rest of the sermon. He said, I knew I had them. They wouldn't sleep for the rest of the sermon. So they said, well, maybe he's thinking he's going to preach heresy today. Probably his last sermon ever to preach. He lost his job, his credentials, and so on and so forth. And so he said, but before I explain what I mean by that, then he set the context by explaining the 6 stages of marriage. I'm going to go to that very quickly. And he said, because there are 6 stages to marriage. That's because of sin that has entered into the world. And then if it hadn't, there wouldn't be 6 stages. So stage 1 is the honeymoon. That's when you're in heaven, yes? Everything is great. Life is perfect at this stage. It's very sweet. So he said, my advice to newlyweds would be to enjoy every minute of it. It's not going to last. He didn't say that, but I'm just adding bits and pieces here and there. But he said, in that stage, it would also be good to be practicing saying the following. I love you. I'm sorry. Will you forgive me? I forgive you. So he said, why? It's because saying these things requires real effort when you are in the honeymoon phase. So it is good to get into the habit of saying these things, because when stage 2 rolls around, it can be painfully difficult to say them. And so he said, there's a certain journalist by the name of McLaughlin, and an author who sort of nicely summed up the honeymoon stage this way. He said, pity all newlyweds. She cooks something nice for him, and he brings her flowers, and they kiss and think how easy marriage is. So before we move to stage 2 of marriage, consider this important question. Why doesn't God allow us to continue in the honeymoon phase throughout our entire marriage? Why does our loving God allow the blissful honeymoon phase to come to an end? Have you ever thought about that? I believe because God is more concerned about our holiness than he is about our happiness. The reason he is so concerned, now you may not agree with me, I'm just saying what he's saying, okay? The reason he is so concerned about our holiness, because ultimately he's concerned about our happiness. So it's not that he doesn't like our happiness. There is no true happiness apart from holiness. And so Matthew 5:8, Jesus said, blessed are the pure in heart. Another way of saying this is, happy are the holy. Interestingly, Matthew 5:4, Jesus also says, blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. So this is a comforting promise for those who are mourning because of their marriage. For many, marriage has become a burden, a curse. And so notice what Adventist Church co-founder Ellen White has to say about Jesus' promise to those who mourn. The Savior's words have a message of comfort to those also who are suffering affliction or bereavement. Our sorrows do not spring out of the ground. God does not afflict willingly nor grieve the children of men. Lamentations 3:33. When he permits trials and afflictions, it is for our profit, that we might be partakers of his holiness. So I would like to paraphrase the last sentence. He says, when he permits the honeymoon phase to come to an end, it is for our profit that we might be partakers of his holiness. So the passage goes on to say, if received in faith, the trial that seems so bitter and hard to bear will prove a blessing. The cruel blow that blights the joys of earth will be the means of turning our eyes to heaven. How many there are who would never have known Jesus had not sorrow led them to seek comfort in him? So once again, I would like to paraphrase the last sentence this way. How many there are who would never have known Jesus had not the honeymoon stage come to an end, leading them to seek comfort in him? Our God, who desires for us to be partakers of his holiness, allows us to go from the honeymoon stage on to the next stage. So when I asked my members, it says what they thought stage 2 is, one member shouted out, the nightmare stage. I guess that would be fitting description. Stage 2 is. What was I thinking? Well, when stage 2 comes around, people find themselves thinking, my spouse and I are complete opposites. For a lot of couples, what initially drew them to their spouse will later bother them. For example, the shy introvert who is attracted to the outgoing extrovert may later resent the spouse who is always away spending time with friends instead of being at home with family. And so now we come to the divorce stage. Next stage is where divorce usually happens. Stage 3 is everything would be great if you changed. So when we marry someone, we choose the partner out of the 7 billion people on this planet. And then all of a sudden we are saying, you have to change. I'll change him. Men get married thinking she'll never change. Okay, now if you are in stage 3 and it is so bad that your home and marriage are falling apart, I highly recommend divorce. Yes, I highly recommend divorce. I wholeheartedly agree with this quote from God's Little Instruction Book for Couples by Jerry McCann. You can never be happily married to another until you get a divorce from yourself. Successful marriage demands a certain death to self. So Paul in 1 Corinthians 15:31 said, I die daily. Galatians 2:22, I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. Sorry. And the life which I now live is in the flesh. I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. So we too must die if we want a successful marriage. So consider these words in a marriage preparation manual called Before You Say by Norman Wright and Wes Roberts. Marriage is a refining process that God will use us to have us become the man or woman he wants us to become. Think about it. God will use your marriage for his purpose. He will mold and refine you for your own benefit and for his glory. So what is marriage? It's a refining process, a furnace. It gets extremely hot in a furnace. So the purpose of the fire is not to destroy us, but to consume the dross. Ellen White had a lot to say about the refining furnace. The refining furnace is to remove the dross. When the refiner sees his image reflected in you perfectly, he will remove you from the furnace. Yes, you will not be left to be consumed or to endure the fiery ordeal any longer than is necessary for your purification. So, in other words, don't try and get out of it when the process is not even halfway through sometimes. It's just beginning. Okay? So we can successfully get past stage 3 if we are willing to get a divorce from self and recognize that God desires to conform us in the image of Christ. So stage 4 is, I choose to love and accept you as you are. So, okay, so that's 3, and then it goes on better, 5 and 6. I'm blessed to have you in my life, and I want to grow old with you. Yeah, so that's how it goes. So as we journey with our spouses heavenward, let us ever keep in mind that God is using our experiences in marriage to daily transform us so that we may reflect the character of Christ. So God's work of refining and purifying must go on until his servants are so humble, so dead to self that when called into active service, the eye will be single to his glory. God brings man over the ground again and again, increasing the pressure until perfect humility and the transformation of character bring them into harmony with Christ and the Spirit of heaven, and they are victors over selves. Now you know why Richard is so humble. Every now and again he has a go at me. Now that's my turn. Or is it the other way around? Yes, but he's helping you around, is he? I hope so. Good. Right, so Paul says, I die daily. So this is just a little sort of elaboration of what we were saying regarding this. When people complain about marriage, why this and why that and why the other, and forgetting the real purpose of marriage and some of those values and some of the things that marriage is supposed to sort of help us with along in our journey as Christians. Now, what about this country? What are those grounds for divorce? Do you know? Okay, let's look at them very briefly. First one is adultery. That is when your husband or wife has sex with someone else of the opposite sex, and you say, well, sorry, I can't live with that person anymore. I mean, you can forgive, but on the other hand, if you don't, you say, no, you're out of here. It's your right, legal right. And yes?
That statement seems a bit hypocritical, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because the country promotes promiscuity. You have things like swingers clubs, which is perfectly legal, by the way.
Yeah, sure.
And all these sorts of things. So how do they see adultery? Is it just, I don't get it.
Is it in the church only that you can get granted divorce?
Well,
the world don't accept it?
that's right. That's another topic. Let's answer that question first. We'll come back to that a bit later. Yeah, just hold it. Yes, obviously, if they are both consenting adults, no problem. They both do it. Or even if one is consenting, the other one does it, then as long as one is not saying, okay, I want, you out because you slept with somebody else, then they carry on the marriage, right?
Can I just give you an illustration on something like
Yes.
that? There was this gentleman, he wanted his house built, and he used his wife to sleep around with everyone until his house was built. She slept with the plumber, she slept with the builder, the electrician, and when the house was finished, she turned and said, so I don't want you anymore, you have no use to me.
Yes.
He had his house and he divorced her.
Yes. Wow. We hear all sorts of things, don't we? Sometimes truth is stranger than fiction, isn't it?
Is this what happened?
Yeah. Oh dear. How awful is that?
He didn't want her anymore.
Yeah. Well, I knew of something a little bit different, but it was not as bad as that. That was, this couple, and Adventist, as a matter of fact, not in this country, somewhere else where I work, and they had beautiful kids, and lovely couple, the regular church members and all. But she had fallen out of love with him for all sorts of reasons. And then so she thought to herself, well, I'm going to divorce him. But she had a building project. And she knew exactly what she wanted, and he was very good at this kind of thing. So she said, okay, do this for me. And so he spent quite a bit of time, I don't know, 2 years or so, doing exactly what she wanted. And once he's done that, she gave him the boot. Yeah. And then she found somebody else. Yeah. Now she's married to that other person. Yeah, something a bit similar, but not as bad, but, yeah, it happens. Yeah, it's very cruel, very, very cruel. What else can you say? Now, as a matter of fact, in law, you cannot give adultery as a reason if you lived with your husband or wife for 6 months after you found out about it. Yeah? So if you found out that they had actually been sleeping around, and you keep on living with them for 6 months, and you can't use that as a reason for cause for divorce, that particular one. During that time, yes. Yeah, sorry. Then the other one is unreasonable behavior. So spouses behave so badly that you cannot bear to live with them, and that could include such things like physical violence and verbal abuse, insults, threats, drunkenness, drug taking, refusing to pay for housekeeping, and such like. Yeah? And then desertion. Now, this is an interesting one. In America, they call it abandonment. And when spouse leaves without your agreement, without a good reason, And, but, you know, or to end the relationship for more than 2 years in the past 2.5 years.
Of marriage?
Yes. For more than 2 years, while you're married, for more than 2 years, they've left for more than 2 years in the past 2.5 years. You'll know why 2.5 years in a minute. Now, you can still claim desertion if you have lived together for up to a total of 6 months in this period. All right. Now, if you have lived apart for more than 2 years, you can get a divorce as long as both agree to the divorce. Yes, your husband or wife must agree in writing. But if you have lived apart for more than 5 years, it's usually enough to get a divorce, even if your husband or wife disagrees with the divorce. That's just been downloaded and published, printed yesterday, so I guess it's probably up to date, because things are changing all the time.
So it was a desertion if she's gone for 2 years living with someone else, can get a divorce? Or she's living by herself, or just...
Doesn't matter, as long as they've gone, you see. There was no agreement that they should separate for a period of time. If you agreed, that's another matter, but if you didn't agree, he just leaves and doesn't give a good reason, and or they say, okay, I'm ending the relationship, they leave. So that's called desertion for more than 2 years in the past 2.5 years. That's how it reads here. Okay. Right, but obviously if it has been adultery, they can just go and file for divorce. That's another story. Right, then there's living, yeah, we've done that already. We'll go to the next one. Who are the real victims in the divorce?
Children.
The children. And that we could spend so much time on that, just talking about, you know, the pain that kids go through. It's harrowing, it's just mind-boggling how painful it is for them. Even though if they say, well, it was perhaps the best thing, but that doesn't preclude the fact that they have been hurting and they are still hurting and they'll probably be hurting for quite some time to come, and perhaps even throughout the rest of their lives. And if they don't process what's been happening, they'll carry it in their own relationships and marriages, and things can really get bad also. Right. What does the Bible say about divorce? Someone read that for us? Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yes. That's a very crystal clear position as far as God is concerned. You know, when he married, the first couple, there was no intention that they should separate or divorce later on, and he never wanted that. And yet we know that in the Old Testament times, you know, people were divorcing their spouse, especially the men. You know, the men, you know, they were divorcing their wives for no reason whatsoever. You know, a Jewish man could wake up one morning and then look at his wife, and he would use an expression, pardon me, but that was the expression that he would use, okay? Your face looks like feces. Yeah. And then he would divorce her as a result of that. Or she burnt his food, he would have a reason to divorce her. It's like, you know, in Islam today, in Islam they do that, you know. The man takes his wife in front of an imam and says, 3 times I divorce you, and divorce, finished. So there was kind of similarities on there. And so when Moses came, he said, what are these people doing? So he said, okay, you have to get at least a bill of divorce. All right? But then when Christ said, you know, why did Moses do that? Because of the hardness of your heart. He allowed that. But as from the very beginning, it was never like that. It was never God's intention there should be divorce. And so anyway, we're coming to that in a moment. we are sort of running ahead of us here a little bit. And so we have to look at, what does, Adventism, what do we say about divorce? It wasn't that long ago when the annual council of the General Conference, annual council, as most of you probably know, is when the church leaders from around the world meet in Washington, D.C. at their church world headquarters, and then they grapple with all sorts of issues, and one of them was not that long ago about the complexities of divorce. They are asking such questions as, what are justifiable grounds for divorce among Seventh-day Adventists? Under what circumstances can church members remarry? What constitutes unfaithfulness? Does the Bible offer clear guidance to the real-life issues facing Adventist churches today? And these were some of the questions that were being asked. And so we'll come back to that in a moment as far as church is concerned. But let's look at those two verses here. That is found in Matthew 5:32 and 1 Corinthians 7, 10 to 15. Scripture recognizes adultery and or fornication, as well as abandonment by an unbelieving partner as grounds for divorce. Yeah? And marriage rests upon principles of love, loyalty, exclusiveness, trust, support, upheld by both partners in obedience to God. And these are the texts that are referenced there. And when these principles are violated, the marriage is endangered. And the scripture acknowledges that tragic circumstances can destroy marriage. And this is, there's two documents here, which is taken from a North American website. One is entitled Divorce and Remarriage in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, Marriage, Divorce, and Remarriage Church Manual, 2005, and so forth. Yes, these are the sort of information that you can download easily. And so let's take a look now at Matthew 5:32, which says, everyone who divorces his wife, except on the ground of sexual immorality, according to the ESV, makes her commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Now, this expression, sexual immorality, has also been translated in different other ways, because, you see, the actual word there is porneia, from which we get the word pornography. It's porneia. But interestingly, the next word after that is mokeia, which is the real one about sexual immorality. So porneia has then been translated in different ways. And so we must not read pornography into porneia necessarily. It could be, but we must not read it in one into the other, okay? All right, okay, so what does it really mean then? Shall put away his wife except for the cause of fornication, according to the 21st century King James Version. According to the Common English Bible, sexual unfaithfulness. And according to the Contemporary English Bible, some terrible sexual sin. And Expanded Bible, she has sexual relations with another man. So you can see it's like more or less, well, it's tending very much towards sexual impurity or immorality or unfaithfulness. That's where it's sort of leading to. And now, the Adventist view of unfaithfulness to the marriage vow has generally seen to mean adultery and or fornication. However, the New Testament word for fornication includes certain other sexual irregularities. And 1 Corinthians 6:9, 1 Timothy, etc., etc. Therefore, sexual perversions, including incest, child sexual abuse, homosexual practices, and others will also add pedophilia, for instance, are also recognized as a misuse of sexual powers and a violation of the divine intention in marriage. As such, they are just cause for separation or divorce. Now, I was a delegate at the General Conference session in 1995 in Utrecht, Holland, when I was also a member of the Church Manual Committee at the General Conference. And this thing came to the floor, and then they wanted it to be approved by the delegates. But then I pointed out to them that I had done a little bit of research beforehand, because they had sent me the Church Manual and they asked me to actually review the whole thing, because they wanted to make some changes. So while I was still field president in Egypt at the time, I made some comments and some observations, but then I did also a little bit of research, and I found out that there were actually, at the time, I was 1995, there were listed 49 different sexual perversions and aberrations and so on and so on, 49. Because by now, I think it's probably, I don't know, 10 times that, I don't know, but anyway. So I said to them, in the committee, said, well, why just those? What about the others? I said, well, things are changing all the time. We are adding more, so we might as well have something here, rather than try to be too prescriptive and then not sort of overlooking some others that may be coming up in the meantime. So at least this gives us an idea of expanding and understanding a bit more this word unfaithfulness, quotes and quotes. Yeah? Now, looking at 1 Corinthians 7:10-15, and all right, you can see it there. Someone wants to read that for us, loud and clear?
To the married I give command, not I but the Lord. A wife must not separate from her husband, but if she does, she must remain unmarried or else be reconciled to her husband, and a husband must not divorce his wife. Do you want me to read all of it?
Yes, to the end, please. Yeah.
To the rest I say this, I, not the Lord, if any brother has a wife who is not a believer and she is willing to live with him, he must not divorce her. And if a woman has a husband who is not a believer and he is willing to live with her, she must not divorce him. For the unbelieving husband has been sanctified through his wife, and the unbelieving wife has been sanctified through her believing husband. Otherwise, your children would be unclean, but as it is, they are holy. Amen. But if the unbeliever leaves, let it be so. The brother or the sister is not bound in such circumstances. God has called us to live in peace.
Thank you. Is desertion a ground for divorce and remarriage? Abandonment, desertion, means that one spouse has left the other without consent of the other spouse. The defendant or respondent left home for a year or more, and the parties failed to agree about the departure. The plaintiff or petitioner failed to pay support, and the departure was not caused by the plaintiff or petitioner. This is the American USA general ruling on this, but we already explained a little bit a moment ago what this is all about. And
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
You go back to the screen.
Yes. This one?
Yeah.
Good. Mm-hmm.
Now, this is not saying that you should take somebody that is an unbeliever to get married to. I want to make that quite clear.
Yeah.
Because it sounds as though that you could have a person who is believer and a non-believer together. This is talking about somebody that is already married to the person.
That's right. Yes.
Where one becomes a believer and the person is not. So it's not saying that then you go and take a non-believer, if you're a believer, to get married to.
And then divorce them.
And then divorce them afterwards. So that is the point with it.
That's right.
Because there was an argument sometime concerning the same thing.
Yeah. Thanks for pointing this out to us. That's right. And so we already talked about this one. And what does God think of the divorcee? God hates divorce, but he loves the divorce people. And this is certainly not the unpardonable sin. Yeah? Okay? Now, let's talk a little bit we're coming to the end now, about the hurt of divorced church members. Pastor Wilmore Eva, who is his former ministry magazine editor, and he wrote an editorial on divorce, and this is the one here. And So he said, you know, he's sort of looking back over his many years as a pastor and then as a ministerial secretary. And he was the pastor of pastors around the world. So he said that some of the most difficult times are those that have to do with finding just pathways through the divorce situations that come to virtually every congregation. You know, I've pastored loads of congregations and in 10 different countries. I've yet to go to a congregation where everybody was, oh no, everything was okay and there was no divorce in the congregation. It just doesn't happen anymore. I'm not saying there aren't, but you know, this seems to be the norm. You know, the statistics that have been compiled, especially in the States, like in California, show that you know, we compare with the rest of the population, not just Christendom, but you know, our divorce statistics are just about the same as that of the society in which we are. And in fact, it was found out that there are more divorces even in Adventism than there are among the Nazarenes, and I forgot which other church it was. They were comparing with those churches as well. So we do have a situation here as well. And then he was Pastor Wilmore, if I was saying, you know, how giving several examples, and he said what he found out among those people that he's talked to and counseled with, there are things like loneliness, depression, great deal of questioning, nobody to discuss it with, total shut out by fellow church members, devastated by hostility, rudeness, judgmental attitudes, censored in their pain, felt really hurt when pastor rejected them and talked about them behind their back. They felt out of place everywhere they went, especially church, where family issues are highly important. And so one who's saying, my life is a mess, and was on the verge of a breakdown, found a divorce support group in another denomination. Now, you know, the thing is that, let's face it, you know, in our church, we have family life department, family ministries, yes? What does the family ministries go around doing? Do you know? What is their main emphasis?
They don't name, they don't do anything.
Okay, that's the worst comment I've heard. But I'm sure they do things. I can tell you what they do.
In South Africa, I know there's a few that don't do anything. They type what they're sitting at the board meeting.
Okay, well, that's not good. No, but in England, they're actually very active. So in what ways are...
together Friday nights for Vespers, have game nights.
Yes?
They talk about family issues.
Yes, they do? Okay. What kind of family issues?
Just parenting issues, marital issues,
Yeah.
enrichment, you know, discussion and how to be better parents or their spouses or what have you. So
Or they
Okay.
go on family life retreats.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah. So the emphasis here, at least in this conference, is marriage. How to have a good marriage, how to be a good parent. And so it's all revolves around married people. How to, you know, have retreats as well. How to be more loving towards your spouse and loving to your children, how to educate them and so on and so forth. But as far as divorce is concerned, divorces, which represent perhaps 40% of our membership, there is very little that goes on there. Very little. Yes, Natalie?
There are two things. So in the Bridge Union Conference, there are family ministries.
Yes.
But they also have one that is also responsible for single
Yes.
people.
Yes.
But the family ministries is like so much bigger than that single people's department.
Yes.
So all the divorced, and so I think they have maybe once a year they meet. But apart from that, it's not spent a lot of budgeting or time on, you know, divorced people or
Yes.
anything like that.
Yeah.
Secondly, I've heard people saying, you know, also people who have been divorced, that there is a culture in some churches, quite a few, where married people, especially women for some reason, tend to kind of like have a culture of looking down and mocking single people and divorced people especially. They're kind of like less worth, you know, than they are because they are married. And there is kind of like this culture. Many single people, many divorced people, you know, single people quite feel like they're kind of like, especially when they're a bit older and they're single, they feel like they're kind of like, they're no longer youth, so they can't really go there. There's not really a group for them. There's no ministry for them that focuses on them. And they're kind of like, you know, many married people, especially women for some reason, yeah, they tend to kind of like, yeah, as I say, look down upon them, feel threatened even by these single women, because, you know, they don't want their men to be taken, or, you know, I'm not kidding you. There is kind of like this thing. For example, for me, I know for a fact that I'm treated differently because I'm not married from my my married colleagues are treated differently than I am because I'm not married. And those that are divorced, and I know we have 2 people who are single parents, and they say that it's kind of like they've been putting in this box where, you know, they're kind of like looked down upon, they're discriminated even in the church, and it's apparently a common culture. Family is the ideal. It's where you have to be, you have to get married, that's kind of like your goal in life, especially for the women. And everything else is not good enough.
Okay.
And that's what I've heard from other churches and people around.
All right. Can anybody else identify with some of the things that have been said here?
I understand, because when I was single, I got married, I was 32 years old. But since I was 18, lots of people on the church, when are you going to marry? When are you going to marry? Which was so horrible. And once I remember that I said, I want, because there is no, the law doesn't allow homosexual people to get married. And they say like this, and I finish the word, because it's always the same. Society, our church and people and family, they are really cruel. Because sometimes we didn't get married because we didn't find anyone to get married. Something like this.
Yes.
Because when we find it, but if we don't, the same thing when you get married, people start to ask, when have you get a baby? When will you get a baby? This is horrible. Because sometimes we can't get a baby. We can't. You know, we have problems, and people are always asking us, and you know, it's so hard. It's so hard.
Yes.
Because the society thinks that this is the ideal, but we can't live like looking for ideal positions, but happy positions. We need to look for, be happy. And sometimes some people are single and are not happy, and they are looking for someone to be happy. This is a big mistake, because we need to be happy before get married, you know, because we need to find someone happy as well and to be happy together.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for those comments. Yes?
I have experience with a young Adventist boy. He spoke about when you're young, how you get treated. This lady came and said to me, oh, I'm pretty, lovely legs, lovely body, and no man. And she said, oh, why don't you take my son? And I wasn't interested in the son. So he did come to me, Pastor, and he asked me to go out with him. I was 17 years old. I didn't know anything about boyfriends. I didn't want a boyfriend. And because I didn't want to kiss him, he slapped me up, Pastor. And I said to my mom, I don't want to see a man. I don't want a boyfriend. Daddy hit you, and I'm not going to have a man beat me. And then I met my husband when I was 18, and I started going out with him, and it was a non-Adventist, and he treated me such like a darling.
Yes.
Until he died.
Oh dear.
He was a good man to me.
Yeah.
My husband was very good. I lived 36 years with him. I knew him for 40 years. He treated me like a lady and a queen. To have an Adventist boy, and my father was an Adventist. He hit my mom and kicked her around and spanked her. It wasn't cool.
No.
It wasn't. And to be brought up in that kind of home, like you said, children suffer.
Sure, sure.
And you also say that we carry it in our lives. It isn't an easy thing, especially you don't want your children to go through it.
Yeah.
And you want the best for your children, that's why you cry and plead with the Lord that your children do not inherit the sins of our parents. And I do not want that to follow my grandchildren either.
Sure.
It isn't an easy road to come into a home where your parents do that kind of thing, and Adventist parents, they are those that really are Christians.
Yeah.
So we need to really, as God's children, encourage each other to love each other until Jesus comes.
Okay. Good. Anyway, we're coming to the end now, and just needed to talk a little bit about some of those things that are very personal and practical and very also sad and hurtful as well. No, this the pastor is concluding his article. He said, when he heard all these words, they grasped at my soul and my pastoral conscience. They were not written to the church as a complaint against the system, but as genuine expressions of what people have gone through and are going through in our churches. As I read them, I realize quite dramatically that in a far more than one divorce situation I have been involved in, I have been too preoccupied with the theological tightness or wrongness of the divorce, the guilt or innocence of one or the other of the couple, the opinions of significant local and corporate church leaders, the potential negative effect the divorce may have in my congregation and on my ministry, and the fires of congregational controversy I might have to fight. That is, I have been more concerned about those realities than I have about the agony of the divorcing couple themselves, the rending disorientation of children who may be involved, the bewildering death of love even while love lingers, the excruciating fear of the present and the future, the guilt, the palpable sense of personal failure, and the literally awful sensation of loss and aloneness that almost inevitably comes with divorce, which is all too often crowned by the rejection and destructive judgment of fellow church members and others. And this, of course, covers only a part of what a divorcing person faces. The question is, what is our ruling attitude and objective as pastors when we deal with families who are going through divorce? I find it impossible to believe that I should become so concerned about what I will call necessary ecclesiastical and theological considerations that I all but forget the absolutely essential human, Christian, and pastoral realities that cry out to my soul in divorce situation. Am I, first of all, a churchman, or am I a minister of the Lord Jesus Christ? You see, because that's another aspect we have to deal with. All the policies of the church, how they are interpreted and how they are applied. And too often, it seems that this tends to be the concern number one, whereas it should be the other way around. It should be the concern for the person who's going through that trauma. And what do we have in place in terms of being able to help them process that and being able then to move on in a better way for better future relationships. And sometimes we don't even want to consider any future relationships. We just say, okay, you divorced? Well, you divorced. Your wife or husband, still a member, not remarried, hasn't died, hasn't committed adultery, so that's it, you got a life sentence. Now, as long as they don't do one of those three things, then you're in prison. You just stay a member and just listen go. And what about the Lord hasn't given me the gift of celibacy, so what? What's the problem? You're not going to get married anyway, because if you remarry, we're going to disfellowship you. So, you already you are hurting, you see, and on top of that, you add insult to injury. And that's what we do. Instead of trying to nurture that person and support that person and help them, acquire all the necessary things that they need for them to be able to process their grief, because it's terrible grief. They've lost something incredible. Yes.
I think in fairness to some of these people, not in quotes really. Culture plays a lot in
yeah, sure, absolutely, yes.
In the way your parents and foreparents
sure.
see you as the individual. If you're not married like yourself, you're expected to produce an heir.
Yes.
If you're from a certain, it's a high expectation that is being placed on you.
Sure.
It's the same as when you migrate to, when my parents came from the Caribbean to England, that's many years, they are expected to do two things. Remember the family back home, so if you work, you need to support them.
That's right.
And two, kids and marriage, you know, plays a serious issue for them. Because they expect you to get married and have kids. So yes, I do understand that the church should put pressure, but what I'm saying is that culturally, that is something that is not easily to resolve, because that is the way the culture says that is the ideal.
So what are you waiting for, brother?
And the change of culture is something that is very difficult.
Sure.
Change the entire culture.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that we should be like the culture, but it's something that
absolutely.
Depends on where you're from. It's even stronger.
Yeah. Well said. Anyway, well, I think we had a good time together here. And, you know, there will come a time when there will be no more divorce. Well, we're looking forward to that time, aren't we? In the meantime, we're sort of struggling in the dark and trying to help each other, support each other.
You know, Pastor, in those days, there wasn't so much support as there is now in the church.
Yeah.
In my mom's time, there was no support. They kind of looked down on my mom and us as children, growing up in a home where the father just left.
Yeah.
It wasn't pretty.
No.
Because we used to walk into church and no one thought of giving us anything to eat. We walk into church barefoot because we didn't have shoes.
Yeah.
They didn't care. They were the rich there.
Sure.
But it hurts. And I promised my children, you know, even if you've got one pair of shoes to church, at least respect God's house. You know, be different. It's not nice to live in a home with these divorces. It's a painful thing.
Yeah. Okay, well, our elder has been very quiet, so it's time for him to stand up and be counted here at the podium with the final prayer. Thank you.